But what makes the NBA and the history of the NBA so great?
Once again, the diversity, the variation. Look at what the NBA was like when it began. Every decade, just follow it. Every decade had its own flavor, had its own aura, and every one of them has been successful. They all have their hero. Every era has their own heroes. Has, the dominant team, or if not necessarily the dominant team, but you know what I mean. The teams that everyone thinks of when you think of that era.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the great plays, if they were to show highlights, the greatest plays in NBA history, there would be plays from every era. There would be games. They said the greatest games played in NBA history. They would have a game from every era.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you say 50s, you think Mike, and you say 60s, you think, Russell Celtics. 70s, you had to split with the ABA. So you may think Julius Erving. But then in the NBA, you're thinking Knicks, Bucks, the Celtics coming back and winning 2 after, the retirement of all the guys except for Hondo. The Bullets going to 4 finals. I believe the Warriors went to back-to-back finals.
I don't remember. I have to look again.
I may be wrong. No. No, Boston played Phoenix. That's right. Okay. But you know what I mean? It's like you got, Portland of the 70s, with Walton and Lucas, I mean, the 80s, obviously everyone that's listening knows, Lakers, Celtics. 90s, you got the Bulls. 2000, you got Shaq's Lakers. Just that. When you get into the teens, you got Steph Curry and Golden State, and it's all you've got history in every era. There's no Black Sox scandal. There's no doldrums. When the game was mediocre, it was always great. Personally, I prefer the 70s over any basketball, because in the 70s, the game was still being treated as the same game you grew up playing. You just had the best players fundamentally. And for the best teams. Then with Stern, they realized, well, if we tweak the rules, we tweak the game, and how we present our product, we'll make boatloads more money.
Yeah.
So the game started to diverge. It's like when you look at the champions of the 70s, those championship teams played the same way great high school teams played, the same way great college teams played. They were the best at playing pure basketball. Yeah. Then they opened up the rules. They started allowing more athleticism, more freelance, more athletic domination over fundamentals. They allow you more leeway with the ball. You talk about the equipment starting to get better every so many years. There's an improvement in shoes and training, in the basket itself, in the ball. But then in the 80s, you look at those teams in the 80s, okay, well, they didn't look like your high school team at all. They played a totally different kind of game that you couldn't replicate at lower levels.
Yeah.
When you look at the Celtics winning in 76, and then if you looked at a state champion basketball team in 1976, and if you looked at the college championship team in 76, which I believe was the last undefeated team with Indiana, they all played the same style of basketball.
Yeah.
Basketball was pure basketball before the rules manipulations. Where now, to win in the NBA, you got to have athletic freaks that can do things never done before. And they got to be able, if you don't have guys that can hit from 30 feet under pressure and guys that can get their head above the rim to go for rebounds and second chance points and all that, you don't have a chance. You have to have the athletes because you're being covered by an athlete of that magnitude. It's more about athletic than about skill, team, skill. When I say skill, people think, well, guys today are more talented. Look at the shooting and look at that's one skill out of every. There's a saying, or a truth, that for truck drivers, professional drivers, you make 100,000 decisions an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if Steph Curry hits 5 logo bombs in one night, it's considered one of the greatest shooting performances of all time. Man, that's 5 times he touched the ball. He was on the court for maybe 42 minutes. What happened to all the rest of the time? They focus so much today on just the highlight plays and not what's going on the rest of the time. That is actually, like when they say Steph Curry is the greatest shooter ever. No, he's not. He's the greatest shooting NBA All-Star ever.
Yeah.
There have been guys throughout history that could shoot just as good or better than Curry, but you know what? They couldn't play basketball at an NBA level.
Yeah.
Curry still has to bring the ball up against an All-NBA defender. He still has to initiate an offense. He still has to set picks and move without the ball. He has to rebound. He has to have the endurance and the stamina and the strength to do this night after night after night after night for 16 years. Okay? It's not just, he's the greatest shooter ever. He's not. He's the greatest shooting NBA All-Star ever. Guy that can be out there, run his team, hit those shots, but you have to be able to play at that level. There are guys that all they do is shoot for their entire lives, and they can outshoot Curry any day. But they can't play basketball. They're 5'9" and weigh like 180. Yeah. Not only can they hit 98 out of 100 3-pointers, they can also down a pizza in about 15 minutes. Okay? They're not eligible for the NBA. They're not good enough to play in the NBA or any organized basketball. But if you just go out to an open gym, they'll hit everything they can put up when they're not in a game. They can shoot better than Curry. Doesn't mean they can play. Curry is the best shooting NBA All-Star ever. Not only can he shoot like that, but he can just plain play. And that's what people lose focus on because of the highlights of only showing him shoot, is that he actually can just really freaking play basketball.
Absolutely.
I made a comment, if I can real quick, about someone made a comment about LeBron, saying LeBron couldn't play in the 80s. Yeah, he could. He'd be Karl Malone. 6'9", 256, bodybuilder. It's the coaching of the era. Back in the 80s, if he grew up in the 70s like Malone, LeBron would have never been allowed by his coaches to play the way he plays. He would have been put under the basket. He'd be grabbing rebounds. He'd be taking 10-foot turnarounds and going to the hole. That swing step from the left block. That's what you'd see. Now, do it in reverse. If you don't think I'm right, do it in reverse. If Karl Malone played today, he'd take more 3-point shots, right? He took a few here and there. He could shoot. He took them once in a while. He was a great shooter. You don't retire as the second all-time leading scorer if you can't shoot, okay?
Yeah.
So, but if you sat there, if there was no John Stockton, You said, wow, okay, what are we going to do? Well, our best player is Karl Malone. Let's just give him the ball. If you had Karl Malone playing a quote-unquote point forward, what would his stats look like? Well, he'd probably score. His scoring clip would drop a couple points. His rebounds would drop 3 or 4 rebounds a game. His assists would go up, and he'd probably end up the all-time leader in turnovers.
Yeah.
Okay, who is that?
LeBron James.
Yes. The best players from every era. Players have not changed. Okay, people think like players from the old days, you hear guys in the 90s were better because they could do this, that, and the other. Guys today are better because they can do this, that, better. Look, human evolution has not changed, guys. You could take the guys, you could clone the guys from the 1940s, have them grow up today, eat today's food, go to basketball camps, play AAU their entire childhoods, and you know what? They'd still end up NBA All-Stars because that's who they are.
Yeah.
Great players play great.
Well, this is for me why the NBA is so great too, is because, and for one, you bring up a great point about how people don't understand history, or they don't understand why it's important, because people don't have an empathy in respect for time. They have empathy and respect for space, in respect to, this is what's in front of me right now and I'm living it.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter that this fantastic idea of combining the 2 biggest leagues in the United States, generally for the purpose of bringing George Mikan and his skill set to present to the United States with, I'm sure, ambitious goals of making it bigger than that. At the time, people don't understand, or they don't empathize with time by seeing, they can't visualize it in front of them because they're only visualizing what is in front of them. So they can't, why the NBA is so great is because it did happen, and that it's a product in existence, because time in the past is existence still, even to today and the future. It's existence, it's reality. That it's the collection of the greatest basketball players in the world, and you're able to see the evolution, you're able to see the battles, the games played, and by evolution, I don't particularly mean that the game is better or worse, but just seeing the league in itself grow.
The way it has moved.
Yes. The league from
it's going in. Yeah.
Yep. The league from having a few teams, they start off, I forget how many teams they started off with.
17.
But 17, but seeing the league fluctuate from having less teams and then more teams, and then it's become steady, and there's talks of we've got W. Dillon here from Kick, sorry, but it's just tap in, got you for life. All right, thank you, W. Dill. You're spamming, but I appreciate it. But the point of it is that the existence of the NBA, and if you take the time to even attempt to put yourself in a different time and empathize with what you understand as existence as you know it, living your life. Again, I'm talking to the void, but the point of it is that you go and you imagine that the history of the NBA is happening right now, because in ways it is. It's just not, in your perspective, happening right now. That's what's so great about the NBA, is having the greatest players, and then eventually, as it's come to be, the proliferation of and the entertainment that it provides to the people that are enthusiasts or just general fans of basketball. I think that's the greatest thing about the NBA. And talking about the specifics of the game, absolutely too. That's another aspect of how great it is just being able to see the differences from an outside perspective, I guess, omniscient, because especially in regards to the past, we already know what happened. So being able to look back and see all of those things and imagine them, I think is what makes it absolutely fantastic. And I think it's at least the greatest entertainment basketball league in the world. And I don't think it's even close.
Yeah. Well, with that type of MC thing, that's that's my biggest pet peeve is so very few people have that and understand it. I made a comment. It was a YouTube short about David Lee Roth,
mm-hmm.
and how wild he was back in the day. And I had made the comment, if you would have told me in 1978 that David Lee Roth would outlive Eddie Van Halen, I would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
All right. And I got all these comments, all these responses saying, oh, well, David Lee Roth, he lives clean and doesn't do drugs and blah, blah, blah. And Eddie became an alcoholic and smoked like a chimney. I'm like, dude, empathy. I said in 1978, all these things you're saying hadn't happened yet.
Yeah. Your
opinion is completely irrational. The whole point of my comment was before you saw how all this transpired. If you would have told me that would have happened, I would have never believed you.
Yeah.
And guys are like, oh, well, Eddie, drank like this. And that was all after. You have no empathy. You can't put yourself in that time and see the world in that time like I could in that thing. And that's what drives me nuts. When they sit there and say, oh, guys, in the NBA back in the 50s couldn't dribble. Watch Bob Cousy. Watch film snippets of the Globetrotters from the 1950s. They can do all the stuff, all the drills that you learn. I mean, when you talk about the different dribbling drills, the spider, all the different ones that are now that they teach at every basketball camp. Pistol Pete's father came up with all of those drills in the 1950s or early 1960s.
Yeah.
They've been around for 60 plus years, those drills. And now, for some reason, supposedly in the last 10 years, they've been perfected. For 50 years, they were just, strange, mystical magic to so many people. And now now they've been mastered. It's like, no, they've been around for a long, long time and guys could do it. But if you did that in a game, remember, back then there were no flagrant fouls and no technicals. You'd get your teeth knocked out.
Yeah.
When they talk about athleticism, I would love to see a decathlon of current NBA players.
Yeah.
And then compare their numbers to Wilt's, to Bill Russell's, Bob McAdoo. People don't think of Bob McAdoo as being really people don't understand he was KD before KD, and he was a better athlete than KD. All right, yeah. Bob McAdoo was the North Carolina State high jump champion. And you know who he beat? Bobby Jones, another Hall of Famer, who was the North Carolina high school high jump champion the year after. Then they ended up being teammates at North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, and then they played against each other in the NBA. And now they're in the Hall of Fame together. These guys are both 6'8", 6'9", were state high jump champions that played in the NBA. Where are the state high jump champions playing in the NBA now? Do any of these guys have those records? They may. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure some do. But to your point, it's just a completely different mentality of how they approach playing basketball. It's all basketball. It's not general athleticism. Again, broadly speaking, I'm not saying there's nobody like this.
Yeah.
They just start playing basketball 365 days a year with all these leagues, and that's all they do is they train to go to the NBA starting from whatever 6 years old or however, But the point of it is that the athleticism is just a different type of athleticism where they're focusing on only playing basketball.
Yeah, like you could argue the greatest athlete to ever play in the NBA is Danny Ainge.
Yeah. I know we talked about this before, but I forget. If you can remind me and anyone who ever watches this.
He was a first-team All-American in football, baseball, and basketball. The only person to ever do it.
Yeah. That's crazy.
He played a couple years of pro baseball with the Toronto Blue Jays, second baseman, I believe, while he was still in college at BYU, getting College Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Before going to the Celtics.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy could play everything. But fans, casual fans don't see him as a great athlete because, he basically was a setup guy for Bird and McHale.
Yeah.
He was at best a third option in his best, I guess in Phoenix he might have been the second option, maybe. Mm-hmm. Or was Sabalos really the second option? But in any case, I guess Kevin Johnson was the second option. But point being, he didn't have a 46-inch vertical leap, so they don't think he's athletic.
Yeah.
It was like,
Well, I just want to bring it back to my theoretical vomit about the NBA. Is that happened, that exists even today, period. It's, even though we're not going through time and we can't grab it with our hands, but that's why the NBA is so fantastic. You've had these athletes, the only guy to ever have done it, to be a 3-time All-American. That's what the NBA represents. Even though it may not be current, it still represents having the greatest athletes in the world at a time. That's what it provided. And and you're talking about this now, but it's crazy how people don't even appreciate that is a thing. Period. It's was and is a real fine line. It is a thing. The NBA still exists. It has existed. So even in a current state of time, it still exists. Period. It's just not living per se, if you want to say that, but it's not foreign. People understand. They might not know that specific about Danny Ainge, but for the more famous guys like Wilt Chamberlain for their athleticism, or Bill Russell, that everyone knows that, generally speaking. So
Charlie Ward.
But the point of it is that it's crazy how people don't appreciate the league itself in respect to these things that aren't existing in front of your face right now.
Yeah.
So
Charlie Ward, right?
I know the name. I don't know the
those 90s Knicks teams. He was a point guard for the Knicks.
Okay, yeah.
He was a Heisman Trophy winner.
Okay, yeah.
He was the best quarterback in the country. Instead of going to the NFL, he played basketball. He's point guard for the Knicks. Charlie Ward.
Yeah.
Florida State, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, he was Heisman Trophy winner. Played in the NBA.
And that's another great example. And that's more current than guys that a lot of people can't even, or they feel like they can't relate to because it's so distant from them, because they haven't, like some of these guys, for the 90s players, a lot of the people, they're in their 50s or they're whatever, their 40s, I guess, to say, to conservatively, for some of these guys that were fans of somebody like Charlie Ward, they can maybe they can go and they can relate with it more because they lived through it per se. But they don't understand that how they feel compared to a younger person who's in their 20s even with me, who I didn't, I couldn't associate that immediately. I knew the name, but the point of it is that they can't, guys that are 20 that can't relate with Charlie Ward because they couldn't see it. And then how people get upset, like let's say that Charlie Ward fan per se gets upset because the young kid doesn't appreciate it. It's going the same way for how some of those Charlie Ward fans feel about somebody like Wilt Chamberlain. It's the same thing. And I know we've outside of this show, we've talked this ad nauseum, but the point of it is that the gripes that you have with certain fans is, I think, exactly the thing that is holding back for the appreciation of the NBA, and that they don't recognize how great it is. Even for today's NBA, it's great in its own way. It's not my cup of tea, mostly speaking, but it's still great in its own way.
Here's the problem with today's NBA. You want to know the real problem?
What's that?
This is the real problem. Real in all caps. Okay? The game exploded when David Stern said, we're going to start prioritizing individual players over teams in individual ability. We're going to push that. We got this guy, Dr. J, Magic and Bird, just came into the league, first year that Stern was in the league office. And then he takes over and Jordan's coming in. He said, we're pushing these guys, we're pushing the name on the back of the jersey, not the name on the front.
No.
Because guys move. Now that we have free agency, guys move. So we're not going to get total dedication to teams because they're going to change. The faces of the teams are going to change from year to year. We're going to publicize the player and their athletic ability. The problem is now going to this pushing the 3-point offense, guys chucking it up from 25 feet and out, and then highlighting dunks. When you take out that entire mid-range, that 80% of the court, you're taking away 80% of the athleticism that you've been trying to publicize for 40 years.
Yeah.
Trying to promote. Now, all you're promoting is guys that can shoot farther than anyone else, not better, because Steph's shooting percentage is still lower than his coach's. But he shoots them from farther out than Kerr did. But who shoots from the furthest and who jumps the highest? Okay, you've just limited your own league.
Yeah.
And that's why guys look at Luka and look at Jokic, and they're the ones dominating statistically. And casuals aren't appreciating it because it's not the same guys that they're seeing in the dunk videos.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Luka will take a 35-footer, logo shot here, but you're really not seeing that from Jokic unless it's a shot clock, issue. But that's you've now gone too far, and you're now alienating the very players that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you were trying to advertise.
Yeah.
Like, look at the top players. Like Magic. He wouldn't even be advertised today. He's not hitting these logo threes, and he's not dunking on you.
Yeah.
So he becomes an also-ran. If they played today, Dominique Wilkins would be getting far more press than Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
Far more clicks, I should say.
Yeah.
But who's the better player?
Yeah.
It's like
I think most people would say Magic Johnson.
Yeah, well, the biggest debate, the greatest debate in my eyes is who's better, Dominique Wilkins or James Worthy? Because here's two guys that had essentially the same level of skill.
Yeah.
They were phenomenal. They had about the same level of athleticism. They're roughly about the same size. But they go to two completely different situations. They started in completely different situations. They grew up in the same town. Okay? They're both from the same town. They go to college. One goes to University of Georgia. One goes to UNC, a powerhouse. So one gets great team success. The other does not. One is on TV every Saturday. The other is not. Then they get to the NBA. One gets to be the team leader and main man from day one in Atlanta with Dominique. He takes over the team day one. Worthy goes in where he's not even guaranteed a starting position as the number one overall pick. He started training camp behind Kurt Rambis.
Yeah.
Right? And then they switched his position. He switched to small forward and played them both. But remember, they had Jamal Wilkes.
Yeah.
So, who's a Hall of Famer. So, two totally different careers. But I've seen interviews with both of them saying, what if they had been reversed? What if Dominique would have went to the Lakers? What if Worthy would have went to Atlanta? And both agreed. They would have had mirror images. They would have had the same, basically the same career that the other guy had. It's situation and circumstance. Now, you ask any casual fan who's better, Dominique or Worthy, they'll all say Dominique because he has all the highlights. He has all the clicks. But the fact is, James Worthy was every bit as good, and actually was, even Dean Smith said James Worthy is fundamentally the best player that he ever had.
Yeah.
Not Jordan, not any of the other, however, double-digit NBA all-star players they had, Bob McAdoo and any of them. But, Vince Carter. Mm-hmm. But he said James Worthy was the most fundamentally sound player he ever had.
Yeah.
So the fact is, James Worthy was every bit as good. And then the big knock on both of them, when they talk about dream teamers. And, you got Pippen and you got Mullen are the small forwards on the dream team. The thing is, if Worthy and Dominique hadn't been hurt, neither Mullen nor Pippen may have even gotten on the dream team.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Dominique and Worthy both on the dream team. But they were both injured that summer.
I think it would have been both of them. I mean, yeah, I didn't know that specifically with the history of that, but if I would have thought, I don't think Pippen or Mullen would have been above them.
Yeah, Worthy had an injured knee, and Dominique ruptured his Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
Neither one was eligible to play.
Yeah.
Pippen, I think, maybe still makes it, and then maybe they select Dominique over Worthy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if either one of them had been healthy, Mullen wouldn't have been on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Because Bird was going to be on it just for publicity reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
But at that point in their careers, if not for the injuries, Dominique and Worthy were both better than Bird. Bird had just retired. That's how injured he was. He had a multitude of lingering injuries. Yeah. They actually had injuries where they couldn't get up and down the court and play. But people forget that.
I think this is another reason what makes the NBA great is the debates that stem from them, the what ifs per se. Yeah. Who's better? Just examples that you brought up immediately is that who's better? What if this happened instead? These things there's so many opportunities to discuss different variables, and there's no real answer because the answer would have been realized in some capacities to at least some of the questions, if they were real, especially when you try to take somebody from one time period against another. There's no, it's all just conjecture and hypotheticals, but you talk about the variables that could have done something potentially. Again, there's no real baseline to that. Now, but for the example that you gave now with the Dominique Wilkins and James Worthy getting on the dream team, there is a baseline and there is a common time and place. So I think for me, I think those are better what ifs. But either way, you still, I think why the NBA is so great because of its history is that these debates do happen. And I think there's a level of them that has, in ways, more validity than other sports, because there is, as we discussed in the beginning of the show, the individual skill set baseline. Mm-hmm. So everyone does the same things, versus in a football game, again, as that example. So I think that the debates and the discussions that come out of the NBA, I think, are a lot more, I don't want to say detailed, it's probably not the right word, but the variables surrounding them, I think, are a lot. I think there's a breadth of more variables that can be involved with the individualism debate aspects of them, or even the team aspects of them. I think there's a breadth of it that's just different because of the versatility surrounding it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is when you say better, so many people that don't understand the game, and this is the thing, is people forget it's a game, mm-hmm. Right? It's not. Baseball is called America's pastime. It was never called America's game.
Yeah,
it's called America's pastime. Basketball, it's a game, okay? And that's not to put any direct, competition between those two sports. But what is the purpose of any game?
To win.
To win. And people will sit here and you always hear people mention the eye test. But first of all, the eye test from a casual means nothing.
Yeah.
That's like, my daughter's coming to me for the eye test on fashion. Okay, well, I don't know anything about fashion, so my eye test means nothing. Okay, it means nothing. So when guys sit here, well, by my eye test, this player's better. Well, you don't know anything. If you did, you wouldn't be talking with us on YouTube. You'd actually be like doing something. Yeah. You'd be coaching somewhere or something, And the fact is, it's a game. They keep score. They tally winners. At the end of the year, they give a trophy. So those are the best teams. Yeah. Players within a team, you can say better, but what is better? When you talk about strongest man, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean the heaviest deadlift, the heaviest bench press, most curls, military pro? What are we talking? What makes the strongest man? What if you have a better squat than this other guy, but he has a higher bench press? Well, who's the strongest man?
No.
When you sit here and you talk about saying this player is the best player, that player is the best player. All right, there's no such thing, really. Mm-hmm. Because best at what?
Yeah.
You have a multitude of skills. Nobody is the best at all of them. And because the game is so varied that there never will be.
Yeah.
And you say, well, the best combined. Okay, well, all right, say you combine all of your best, so you have all of these amazing statistics, but you don't win. You don't win at the game you're playing. How can you be the best if you don't win at the game? That's like, we play a game, right?
Yeah.
We'll play Monopoly. You, me, Nick, and Hoop Guy, right? We play Monopoly. We play 7 games, a 7-game series of Monopoly. And over that 7 game, I won 2 of them. But my accumulated money and assets, I'm by far the most. I'm the best Monopoly player. Over the 7 games, I ended up, if you total every game together, I totaled this many millions of dollars or thousands of dollars, whatever. So that means I'm the best because I had the most individual numbers. I had the most railroads I got the most, properties. I had the most hotels. I got the most money at the end of the game, but I actually only won 2 of the games. But then you won 4 of the 7 games.
Yeah.
And you were middling as far as how many, but you ended up outlasting everybody and winning 4 of the games because of just how the dice fall.
Yeah.
So who's better? I always use the salesman analogy with Jordan and LeBron with, if you change points to dollars, and you say, okay, you got one guy in the 76 year, I think we're 76 years of the NBA now.
Yeah, or something. What is it? 19? I don't remember. I know that I think it officially started as the NBA in 1949. I'm sure you would I'm sure you know. I know that.
I mean, we know all the nuances with the BAA, all that stuff. But whatever it is, let's just say 80. Let's just say 80, because no one's going to break either of these in the near future.
Yeah.
So, in a company's 80-year history, this guy, LeBron, is the all-time leading salesman. He made the most money in the 80-year history of our company.
Yeah.
He made the most money. He's the best salesman. And you go, well, wait a second now. Remember Mike? We had this salesman. He was here for 15 years. And he led the company in sales 10 of those 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, which one was the better salesman? The guy that was salesman of the year 10 times in his 15 years with the company, or the guy that is the all-time leader in sales in the history of the company? Which one is the better salesman?
So I know I've talked about this with you. I think it's an analogy. I think that gets the general point across. For me, it's just that I think with sales, it's I'm not to say that it's not a competition, but the point is to get the dollars. You know what I mean? In the NBA, there's more variables to it, or basketball in general. But I get your point, and I think your point is that there's two lines of thinking to it.
But here we get to that empathy thing you said.
Yeah.
Do you think LeBron James became the all-time leading scorer by accident? You think Jordan just tripped and fell into 10 scoring titles? It was entirely their focus.
Yeah.
To do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like making the dollar.
Yeah. No, I get it. I'll leave it at that. I think I still think it's a good analogy. I think there's just things that I think, and they're analogies for a reason. They're not supposed to be exact anyway. They're analogies, so it's a good analogy.
Well, what you're supposed to do is, as a retort, no matter which guy you like or which point of view you agree with, is you say, yeah, but Jordan's selling got 6 Business of the Year titles.
There you go. That's enough. Yeah, that's a way to put it on there.
In which case, every argument, when you get to a stone wall, falls back to winning.
Yeah.
So let's forget about the minutia and just say Bill Russell's the best basketball player ever because he won the most. That is the point.
He won 11 business titles.
Yes. If you want to see other guys were better shooters, yes. You want to see other guys were better at this or that or the other, yes. But the point of the game is to win. And situation and circumstance shined on him. He was in the right place at the right time with the right skills and the right teammates and the right boss to make it happen. Yeah. And the right things fell in place.
Yeah.
If Alex Hannum could have controlled his temper and coached Wilt for a long period of time, then Russell probably has half the championships.
Yeah.
You know, it's all situation circumstance. You know, when you look at Jordan, what if Bias doesn't die? What if Bernard King doesn't blow out his knee?
Yeah.
He had just hit his stride in getting scoring titles and hitting his prime, and he blows his knee out. What would those Knicks teams that they were going to war with Chicago in the 90s, what if they had Bernard King? I mean, their second best player was like John Starks. What if they had healthy Bernard King for those runs? They went game 7 when Ewing was practically alone.
Yeah.
I mean, how things turn out. What if Bird, picks up the phone and hires a paving company?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt his back in the summer of '85. How does that change history? It's situation and circumstance. This guy could have been, that guy should have been, these guys never would have been. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, the people with the trophies are the people with the trophies. They are the ones that did it. You can say, oh, well, this guy didn't have that. This guy didn't have that. Whatever. Situation and circumstance. That's not what happened.
And I think there is a distinct difference between being better and being greater. And I think that in ways they touch each other. But if you want to say that, again, I don't particularly agree with this. But if you want to say that Wilt Chamberlain is greater than Bill Russell, I think there's a better argument than saying that Wilt Chamberlain, in respect to the results of the purpose of playing basketball, are. Like, I don't think there's a real argument that he was better than Bill Russell in respect to playing NBA 5-on-5 basketball. I don't think there's a real argument. If you want to say he's greater because of all the statistical titles, or if you want to go back to the individual categorization the
individual dominance was insane. These young kids that sit there and say Shaq is the most dominant player ever is just, it's such a laughable statement. It was like, go look at what Bird said, that he read the Wilt Chamberlain biography. Yeah, the NBA rule book.
Yeah.
When Wilt retired, he had it was either 127 or 129 records.
He's got something like 70 still, which is still...
No, it's in the 50s.
Okay.
I actually counted.
Okay, yeah. I didn't actually look up the NBA record book.
Well, if you Google, it still tells you 72, which is wrong.
Okay,
62.
that's what I just Googled
wrong.
it. Yeah,
because I watched that. I Googled it, and it said he still had or shared 62 records. And then I watched James Harden break one of his records,
Yeah.
I Google that record and it says James Harden, and then I Google Wilt number of records and it still says 62.
Yeah.
It's still for like 8 years has still said 62. It's not 62. It's like 58. But still, it's more than anybody. Bill Russell, when he retired, had 40. Michael Jordan, when he retired, had 12.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and well, just since bringing this up, the Wilt and Shaq debate. So, T Perfect. We're going to try and film our debate live, in person. Well, not live, excuse me. No, actually at my house. It's probably going to end up in my garage because my wife, I got a wife and kids. But the point of it is that we're going to try to do that tonight. We're going to try and film that and then release it. It's not going to be live on YouTube because that's all. I'd have to move my computer out there and that's just too much.
Yeah, well, I was actually trying to figure out if I could do this show from the beach.
Oh, yeah.
But I couldn't get anything to work, so.
Oh, your phone?
Yeah, well, the computer, and it's a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I couldn't. I was like, this is too difficult. It's also Saturday at the beach, and the traffic was insane. I'm like, no, you're not going to be able to, no go. But we just moved up here, so I was going to go out to the water and at Emerald Isle.
Yeah.
Up the road. But no, interesting comparisons would be a great show.
Yeah.
And like people always mention Shaq and Wilt, when they were completely different players. Like, not even talking about size, build, strength, whatever, but just how they played. Completely different players. Wilt was actually more like Jokic.
Yeah.
People will sit here and compare, Bill Russell to like Ben Wallace, and it's like, no. No.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, the player probably closest to Bill Russell, and I don't know if you'll understand my meaning, but it really, to me, is not mentally, but physically, in what they did on the court, is Scottie Pippen.
Okay.
Scottie Pippen.
So you said mentally. You said mentally on the court. Not mentally.
As far as on the court, what they did. Chicago does not win if Pippen had an ego.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
If he doesn't gel with Jordan at a young age, it doesn't work. And he's gone and someone else is in there.
Yeah.
Okay? He voluntarily excelled his game while at the same time pulled back, knowing that it only worked if he accepted the number 2 role and just did his job.
Yeah.
It was crazy athletic, crazy long, defended the other team's best perimeter defender, was the trash man, the garbage man that always did whatever needed to be done. If you needed him to play point, if you needed him to take, to be the designated three-point shooter, he was that early in his career. He doing that jack of all trades thing, plugging the holes, having a guy that was so versatile you could plug him in anywhere to do any job. That's what Bill Russell did. People don't realize Bill Russell on different playoff runs led the Celtics every year in rebounding, but he also in different years led the team in scoring, led the team in assists. Okay. He did everything, whatever needed to be done, he did it. When you say, well, he was never better than the third leading scorer during a season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he let his teammates shine. They were scorers. They would bring in guys that would score, like Don Nelson. People forget, before being a Hall of Famer with Boston, Don Nelson was a bench player for the Lakers. He was a Laker.
Mm-hmm.
And he got cut by the Lakers. Why? Because he couldn't play D. Boston gets him. And he asked. He was like, well, Red, I'm not really the best defender. Bill Russell tells him, we didn't get you to play defense.
Mm-hmm.
We got you to score. On defense, all you have to do is keep your man in front of you for, as much as possible. When your man beats you, just take off down court.
Yeah.
Because one of three things are going to happen. Occasionally, he'll make the shot. More likely, he'll miss and I'll grab the rebound. Or I'll block the shot and start a fast break. We have 2 out of 3 if we plan it.
Yeah.
So once the guy gets a step on you, you take off to the other end. Let me handle the defense. Now Don Nelson's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Because situation and circumstance. And he had a team leader that understood how to play the game and how to help his teammates succeed, how to cover their weaknesses. Pippen would step in. When he had to play point, he'd play point. Basically, Pippen was the backup at every position except center. He was starting small forward. He was the backup shooting guard. If Jordan went out of the game, Pippen was the main man for those stretches.
Yeah.
When Jordan went to baseball, Pippen was the main man on the team. All right? But when Jordan was on the court, it went to Jordan, and Pippen understood that, and he played his role.
Yeah.
You got all this stuff going on now with them arguing and talking and all this smack 30 years later. That's whatever. He did what he needed to do for the team to succeed. And even Jordan has said it. And when he said it, I understood it. But so many people didn't. He said, without Pippen, we don't win 6. We just don't. Because what he was saying was anyone else come into that position to play that role for Phil Jackson on that team would not have, at the same time, accepted the hit to the ego and at the same time flourished in that role. There's no other player you can point to in that era and say, oh, you stick him on that team, they still win 6. Wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It had to be Pippen.
Yeah.
They still would have won 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever. They would have won a lot because they had the best coach, the best player, and they had great role players. They still would have won many.
Yeah.
But even Jordan said they don't go 6-0 unless it's Pippen.
Yeah. So Rex, are you going to be available next week? Would you like to do another show?
I do not know a week in advance. I don't know till about Wednesday whether or not I'll be available on Saturdays.
Okay. I'll get with you then. It's about 8 o'clock here. Got to start getting stuff for my kids together. It's usually about the time that they start rolling up. Some good breakfast for them and all. But this has been a fantastic time as usual. Thank you for coming. It's been a long time.
Yep.
I appreciate talking why basketball is so great in the NBA as well. So thank you, sir. Do you have any last words for the Void?
Go play ball. Work on your left hand.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Absolutely. And yeah, for anybody that watches this back, I'm going to be posting this on the channel. So anyone that's watching this back, yeah, I trying to get back into it. I've had an unfortunate event lately in respect to the old YouTube channel. It was removed for whatever reason. So I took a little bit of a hiatus after I came back, just trying to come to grips with that it actually happened, which I don't know. It's ridiculous. But anyway, expect me to be doing more stuff with Rex, and I'm going to be doing stuff with T Perfect, and with Scap Attack. I'm going to be trying to do a Patreon venture with him on the side. So please look out for all of that. And yeah, please put in the comments, if you're looking back on this, what do you think makes the NBA so great? What do you think makes basketball so great, and why? And for everyone, Michael Jordan fans are the best.